we are going to officially start the meeting. If everybody can please rise and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to welcome everybody to the November Borough Board meeting. Just a few quick housekeeping things. Attendance, everybody's here except a representative from Councilmember Borelli's office. Acceptance of the minutes. Brooke emailed everybody a copy of the minutes. So if I could just entertain a motion to accept. Jerry first, Bob second. Okay, so for our presentation this month, we have the New York City DEP is going to give us a presentation on the citywide East River long-term control plan. I just want to mention to everybody that the Borough Board is not a public meeting. Only the members of the board are allowed to speak and ask questions. However, we have arranged with DEP that we are going to allow them to have the meeting afterwards, so whatever questions you may have, they will be here to answer all of your questions and everything. So DEP, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mikkel Agate. I am a Senior Advisor in Public Affairs at DEP. I think I had the opportunity to meet many of you last year when we presented on a separate water quality plan. But for tonight, I really want to focus specifically on what's called our long-term control plan, or LTCP. So first off, to sort of set the stage a little bit about why DEP is developing this plan, you may know that most of the city is served by what's called a combined sewer. So that's one pipe going down the street that takes sanitary waste from all of our homes and buildings to our local wastewater treatment plant, and also takes stormwater runoff that's generated whenever it rains. So during very rainy events, that mixture of stormwater and wastewater can discharge into local areas in the New York City waterways. On dry days like today, all of our wastewater goes straight to one of our 14 wastewater treatment plants. But the long-term control plan really focuses on the water quality issues that can occur on those very rainy days when you could have sanitary waste discharging. So we have what's called a consent order with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, DEC, which required the city to come up with a series of long-term control plans to really look at the water quality in the different water bodies across the harbor, and to identify when that issue of combined sewer overflows is an issue for water quality. So we have been in negotiations with the state since 2012 when that consent order was signed, and we have been working on a series of these long-term control plans. So since that consent order was signed in 2012, we've actually submitted 10 LTCPs, and we're currently developing our last one, which is this East River Open Waters one, which is due to the state next March. So to give a little context for why this particular LTCP is the last one of those 11 is because it's our largest one, and it covers the vast majority of the New York City harbor. So you can see it up in the Bronx and northern Manhattan. It covers the Harlem River, the full Hudson River, the upper East River and Long Island Sound, and then what's relevant for Staten Island, which is upper and lower New York Bay, and Arthur and Kilvan Cole. So this plan we've been working on for multiple years to really come up with strategies that could reduce combined sewer overflows into this portion of the New York City harbor. So the interesting thing about Staten Island is that compared to the rest of the city, Staten Island has a very small combined sewer area. So for this map, Everything in white is what's served by the combined sewer area, and it's really the older parts of the city. So almost all of Manhattan, significant portions of the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens. The rest of the city is served by what's called the separate sewer system. So rather than one pipe going down the street, you have two. One that's taking sanitary waste to one of our wastewater treatment plants, and the other that's taking stormwater runoff directly to the harbor, or in Staten Island's case, to one of our blue belts. And I think many of you are very familiar with our blue belt program. So when we're talking about this plan, this LTCP, it's really only impacting the areas of Staten Island that are in white. So very small portion of the borough compared to, say, Brooklyn. So to give you sort of an overview of the analysis that we've been doing over the last couple of years, it's helpful to give a sense of where we've started from. So many of you know that the city has invested a ton of resources into our wastewater infrastructure, our sewer infrastructure. So over the years, that's resulted in about a $4.2 billion commitment into projects that reduce combined sewer overflows. So many of these are what we call gray infrastructure projects. So this would be, if you heard of like our Padagett CSO facility, which is a facility that essentially takes that mixture of stormwater runoff and wastewater and holds it in a giant tank until it stops raining, and then pumps it back to one of our wastewater treatment plants. That's a project that would be in that component. We've also been really building out our green infrastructure program, and the Blue Belt system is really sort of the our early attempts at building out green infrastructure using more natural systems, ecological enhancements to really move water in a way that uses it as a resource instead of a waste. And here in Staten Island, we've had a lot of green infrastructure projects. You may have seen that we've partnered with the Parks Department or local schools, where we've taken what was like impervious area, play space, parking lots, and we've converted it into green infrastructure. So in this case, this is the first playground up top. The system here is actually designed to collect rainwater in sort of reservoirs underneath the play space. So green infrastructure has been a really important component of the work that we do to reduce combined sewer overflows. One of the other things that I know is really important to folks that live here in Staten Island has been our efforts to reduce floatables. That's the term that we use to describe trash or debris that can end up in our waterways. Often this starts out as litter on the street that can be washed into our sewer system, out directly into the harbor. So we've been working really closely with that other program, the separate sewer program that I mentioned, to look at opportunities to reduce trash in our waterways. Some of these programs have been long-standing. You probably are familiar with our work on our catch basins, what we do to clean out our catch basins. But we're also looking at purchasing an interpier skimmer vessel. So if you think of like a boat in the waterway that's just going out and collecting trash as it sees, we're really thinking about what can we do to make sure that there's no trash impairing water quality and impairing sort of the aesthetic and the look of our waterways. We have a lot of different programs that target trash in the water, some of which are more educational and informational. So some of these, if you think about DOT's Adopt a Highway or Adopt a Street program, doing things like encouraging people to create art along their local catch basin and tell people not to either dump trash or to pour oil down it. So when we think about what can we do to reduce garbage in our waterways, we think about it holistically, not just the structural or infrastructure controls that you can do, but really behavior change with people who might not realize that their actions are impacting the water at the end of the pipe. So I want to just give you a little bit of sort of background about water quality here in New York City. The amazing thing about water quality is that right now, water quality is better than it's been since the Civil War. Significant investment in projects in our wastewater treatment plants has resulted in really excellent water quality. So this gives you a sense of where we still have work to do. These are water quality standards that were set up by the state. You can see sort of the blue and the green where we're currently meeting water quality standards. These are sort of the different bacteria that the state measures us by. But in a lot of our sort of smaller tributaries, there it's a little bit hard to see, but some of the waterways that are kind of infamous, like the Gowanus Canal, Newtown Creek, the tributaries of Jamaica Bay, there's still a lot of work for us to do to continue to improve water quality. One of the things that's been interesting about the water quality sampling we've done over the course of this LTCP is that in a lot of ways we're actually meeting water quality standards for the vast majority of the harbor. So you can see that in blue when you look at the Hudson River, the East River, Upper New York Bay. But you can see for Staten Island there's still issues here on sort of this border with New Jersey, and that's one of the things we really started to work with New Jersey to kind of identify what those issues could be. Because if you remember from our map earlier, it's not the combined sewer system, because the combined sewer system is up here towards the northern part of the island. So we know that we have MS4 outfalls here, but we also know this portion of New Jersey has just started their long-term control plan, so we're sharing information and sharing data with them so that we can all sort of work together to better understand how to improve water quality here. So this is fecal coliform, which is a bacteria indicator. Enterococci is another bacteria indicator that's sort of more specific to humans. It's kind of like a better indicator of either CSOs or like a human-based component. So we look at that as part of this LTCP as well. And then we show when there's opportunities for us to improve. So this looks at baseline conditions. So you can see right now there's a lot of kind of flare-ups in the Hudson River and the East River. And then we show, okay, if we were to have 100% CSO control, so no more of that mixture of stormwater and wastewater discharging into the harbor, what would happen? And you can see how it's like all blue in those cases. So we look at that gap and then we say, okay, we're gonna do an analysis to see what the costs are, what types of projects could we look at, and identify alternatives. So really the bulk of this presentation is to give an update on what types of projects and the costs we've been analyzing for meeting this gap. If not necessarily 100%, what would it be if it was 75% or 50%? Because we really try to understand what the cost and the benefits are for different projects. So as we were doing this analysis, we had a couple of key takeaways. So the first one was that the city has invested a lot of money into the harbor so far, and that's why we're meeting water quality standards in the East River and the Hudson River. And we're getting a lot of that mixture of stormwater and wastewater to one of our treatment plants. So you can see that the percentage of CSO is relatively small compared to how much is actually being treated at one of the plants. We also show that there's a high level of water quality attainment. So when we think about what types of projects we should be looking at, we're seeing, okay, there's a lot of work that's been done already in terms of attainment. And then what we've also seen is that as we've gotten better, the costs go up significantly and your projects get bigger with diminishing returns, right? So as you're going after sort of the last bit, it just costs more. So we looked at all of these takeaways as we've been doing this analysis over the last several years. But for all of these projects, there's a variety of projects that could be used to reduce CSOs. So we talked a little bit about green infrastructure. There's opportunities to work on our sewer system. We look at floatables, which I mentioned. So what you see here, everything that is in yellow are projects that we're continuing to do. So we're continuing to do green infrastructure. We continue to build out storm sewers. So that's part of the state of good repair for DEP. Everything that you see in gray are a tool that we looked at but ended up being screened out. So we either said like, it's too costly, there's not enough benefit here, or it just wouldn't work for such a big area that we're trying to cover. And everything in green are the types of projects that we're still looking at right now. So we're looking at these projects that are in green. We'll come up with what's called a recommended plan, and then that is the plan that we'll submit to the state in March. And so right now there's the opportunity for us to share what alternatives we're looking at so that the public can provide feedback on these alternatives and say, you know what, we really think it's important that the city continue to invest in wetland restoration. Wetlands are important not only for water quality, but for local habitat, and so the public can provide comments that we evaluate that goes to the state as well, so that it's very clear what the city is recommending. So this cool little graphic that we worked really hard on for a city agency sort of shows the process of how CSOs happen. So you have your sewers, and of course it's raining. The orange is sanitary waste, and so you see it going into the sewer and out to one of our treatment facilities. But again, if there's a lot of rain, you can have that discharge into the harbor. So this graphic is here because I wanted to show how this tool here, this regulator, which is either sending the sanitary waste and the rainwater to the treatment plant or to the outfall, is a really important thing for us to look at as we're looking at our entire sewer system. So one of the key alternatives that we're evaluating is where optimizing or improving our regulators could be a good investment because we're getting more of that flow to the facility and not out at the harbor. So let's talk a little bit about the specific waterways. So if you remember at the beginning I showed that map that showed the whole portion of the city that's covered by East River open waters. So when we dig into a little bit of the section that's relevant to Staten Island, this first portion is called Lower and Upper New York Bay. So the yellow here is what's served by the combined sewer system. So this is the area that we're really trying to focus in on to reduce those combined sewer overflows. But again, the majority of Staten Island is in the dark blue, is separate. So we've got 5 CSO outfalls, and those 5 account for 80% of the CSO discharge. But when you look at them, only 1 is in Staten Island. The rest are in Brooklyn. So when we're looking at what types of projects do we want to zoom in on So while it's the smallest volume, it's still important for us to evaluate it to see what can we do, what opportunities are there to even further reduce this outfall from that location. So here are the alternatives that we're looking at that are specific to this area. So on the Brooklyn side, we're looking at regulators that are close to these outfalls over here. But here in Staten Island, we're looking at this gravity flow connection from Victory Boulevard with an upgrade at the Hannah Street pumping station. So right now, this would divert dry and wet weather flow upstream. So it would reduce the CSO from that particular outfall, and that would cost us about $22 million. And we'd be able to reduce by a little over 40 million gallons a year. So this is currently the project that we're evaluating, and we will potentially submit this to the state as our recommended plan. So as part of this exercise, even though that project is really the sort of most cost effective, I mentioned that we look at the gap as well. So we look at 100% CSO control, 75% and 50%. When we start talking about those numbers, we start talking about a lot of money, exactly. And that's again because you sort of have the diminishing returns of trying to capture all of it. So trying to capture even 50% would result in about a $3 billion investment for only 1 billion gallons of capture. And when we talk about this funding, all of this comes from the water rate. And so as stewards of the environment and stewards of our budget and the water rate, we really try to get the most cost-effective project. Because if we were trying to do projects like this across the city, that would be very, very expensive for our water ratepayers. But as part of the analysis to the state, we still conduct this analysis to better understand. Okay, so for Arthur Kill and Kill Van Colt, sort of similar story, where in blue is the separate sewer system. So we're really focused on the yellow, which is there's more outfalls here. And the biggest one is this PR029. So you can see that's 155 million gallons here. So the rest of them are very small. So if you can see with the PR027, very small, only 2 million gallons per year. So as we look at projects for here, we actually weren't able to find any regulator projects that fit this part of the island. And so the analysis that we'll submit to the state will show this 50, 75, and 100% control. And again, this is when we're getting into the 300 million, the $650 million projects. So as part of this process, we have already released what's called an LTCP summary. So that's a document that goes into more detail of the slides that I've presented tonight. And that document is currently open for public comment. So it has an introduction, it sort of goes through an overview of how gray infrastructure and green infrastructure works. But what's really relevant for this LTCP are chapters 6, 7, and 8. So that's where we go into more detail about the work that's already been done. We talk about water quality attainment, so that's all the sampling, water quality sampling that we've done in the analysis. And we give snapshots that go into more detail, particularly on that Hannah Street pump station project that I mentioned. So for folks that want to submit public comments to us, we'll be taking them until December 2nd, 2019. And then we have sort of the rest of the process. So in December, that's when public comments are due on the alternatives. In January, we'll have another public meeting and we'll say, okay, we've finished evaluating all of our alternatives. We've reviewed all of the public comments that we've received. And now here is our final recommendation to the state. And we'll present that to the public so that people can give us any final comments they have about our recommendation. And then we'll submit that final document to the state in March 2020. So we're really kind of at the tail end of a process that began in 2016. We first started taking water quality samples and evaluating the data. But you can sort of get a sense that there's a lot of room for public engagement to review these documents and to provide feedback on the analysis that we've done. And then we have a lot of information available on our website. Any questions? We have brochures, we have the summary that I mentioned, we have a lot of maps, and we have the data that we've collected. So for folks that are really curious about what type of sampling we've done, what the results were, all of that is available at nyc.gov/DEP/LTCP. And with that, I'm done.
I just have a quick, not on the plan, but there was something in the presentation that caught my eye. The litter skimmer.
Yeah.
How much does something like that cost?
It depends. The smaller ones can be in the kind of like $10 to $15 million range. We've also had some good conversations with folks in Baltimore who have done the trash wheel. If you've seen, it's kind of looks like a paddle boat that actually is scooping trash out of the water and into a canister. We've done some analysis on that as well.
Okay. Does any other members of the board?
Thank you. If I understood your presentation correctly, on a normal dry day, our plants have, I guess, have adequate capacity for sanitary treatment, so we're not really talking about the rainy day activity when we're bypassing the plant basically in direct discharge with dilution, I guess.
Correct.
Is that what causing the fecal coliform and the bacteria to fall, is the storage and just the volume of water over time?
Yeah.
Not really treating it then, right? There's no other treatment, it's just storage and direct discharge?
The treatment happens at the treatment plants, but if there is that mixture going out, that's going out untreated.
Directly.
It's going out directly, but the percentage, it's like 10 to 15% sanitary and 85 to 90% stormwater runoff. Yeah, so if you just think about when the sewer system was built, it was like the height of innovation that you would be able to take your sanitary waste and your rainwater together in the same pipe and take it to treatment. But as New York has gotten, we've had more buildings, more streets, more sidewalks, we've gotten more and more impervious. The amount of rain that sort of gushes into our sewer system is tremendous volumes. And so that exacerbates these CSOs.
Any other member of the board have any questions? Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Okay, so I'm just gonna finish up our meeting and then I will turn over the room to DEP. So correspondence, we did not have any this month. Does anybody have any old business to bring up? Okay, new business, in December, we have DOT coming. They're going to give us an overview of a few things they're working on. Does anybody have any new business to bring up?